Well, folks, I do get the occasional request to still do cash cow builds in GT7, and since it's been a minute since I did a Le Mans style build, of course last time around was for Spa, this time I actually found what might be one of my new favourite vehicles. You can run almost the entire race on fuel map 1 and still never pit in for tyres or for fuel. So do a full 7-lap event, end up like 2-3 minutes ahead of everything else, and have a lot of fun at the same time as well. And the car is of course one of my favourites anyway, the Peugeot 908. Now in terms of the tuning, I guess there's not actually much point in jumping into the garage because you can't do that much to the car anyway. Now, of course, you will want the intermediate tyres, so the rain tyres in other words. In terms of the other parts, you actually don't really need too much else beyond the ballast and the power restrictor, because although I do have other stuff fitted, I'm not actually using it. Stuff like the turbo, for example. So, as you can see, it's very heavily restricted, particularly on power, to get it down to that level. The weight isn't too bad, because obviously being an LMP car, even with the ballast, it's still only, well, not much more than 1,100 kilos, so that's better than many of the Group 4s anyway. With 350 horsepower, that's about on par. Of course, you've got a very healthy amount of torque as well, and that actually ties into how to use this one, because this is actually a manual tune, which sounds like an obvious thing to say to many people, but as many of you know, I'm lazy. I like to drive auto. This one, though, definitely is not only more fun with a manual. I know some say all are, blah, 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 that's for another time. But this one is crucial that you do use a manual box. Because as with any vehicle in the game, if you short shift, you do save a lot of fuel, but especially here with that super low revving diesel, you really can see the fruits of doing that. Now, as far as the suspension, I haven't done anything too radical there. We've got 70 on ride height, 5 for anti-roll, 30 and 35, and then 40 on the front for the expansion. 4 for the frequency on the springs, 3 degrees of camber, little bit of toe out 10 on the front, toe in 20 on the back. The diff, pretty standard stuff, again 15, 20 and 40. As far as the transmission, I've actually even opted to leave it standard, because even though you could upgrade it, there's not really any advantage in doing so, especially when you're using a manual box and you can change gear when you want anyway. For the power restrictor and the ECU, I would recommend having 71 and 70 respectively. And as far as the ballast, we've got 198 kilos, and I've actually popped that 27% toward the front. So it's a slightly more front-heavy vehicle, and having more weight over the front tends to help your point level as well, to allow you to drop the weight a little bit and have just a fraction more horsepower. As far as the downforce, that is set as low as it can go. Of course, with such a restricted amount of horsepower, you don't really need to have a huge amount of downforce anyway. And when I say not a huge amount, it's already got a ton of downforce anyway. Almost literally in this case. And as far as the race, I haven't done the weeklies yet. Shame on me. They've only just changed though, I think. So, of course, many of you already know this, but jump into Europe. You want to go into Le Mans, aka Circuit de la Sarthe, and go to the 700 point WTC or World Touring Car event. Now, obviously, this one is the same restrictions as always, so just check out the event in career mode if you're not familiar with it. And, of course, we'll jump out into an example of the race to show you what the car can actually do in practice. Now, as far as this one goes, I already mentioned you can do the whole race without pitting in, and amazingly, you can do it on fuel map 1. And I don't think there are too many vehicles. I think there are some. I seem to recall the Honda Grand Prix car could do a similar thing. I recall it getting a little bit nerfed, but maybe not, I can't remember. I was typically using the Celica rally car quite a lot, because it's a very strong all-rounder. It has a huge amount of power. The point level is surprisingly low, even fully tuned, and the fuel is good enough. This one, though, it's so much more fun, and as a general rule, I would recommend changing gear from, or enter second gear at about 70 miles an hour. Obviously, you'll have to do the conversion to kilometres if you're driving kilometres, but change into second gear at about 70 miles an hour, change into third gear at about 84, change into fourth gear at about 108, change into fifth at about 128, 130-ish, and then change into sixth anywhere around 140, 142. Top speed wise, you'll be up around 160, 165, so it's not too bad, especially for a slightly under 350 horsepower car. Acceleration wise, it's not the quickest thing out there. This is not the kind of car where you'll be in the lead by the end of the straight. For some players, maybe you will, but unless you muscle your way through the pack, you probably won't be. On the other hand, though, because you never have to pit in, not only is it still quicker than everything else, you will ultimately overtake them with no issue. It just takes a little bit longer because it's not as ridiculously fast as some of the other builds that I've done. But the key here is you open up such a huge gap because you never have to pit it. So when they inevitably do, and especially if it rains, with those intermediate tyres, you will blow away the competition. They don't stand a chance. You'll end up, like I said, 2, 3, sometimes 4 minutes ahead. If it does rain heavily, that's even better. I actually, as you'll probably see here, had a relatively rain-free event. Typical. When you have a car that's good for the rain, you end up not having it, so that won't be quite as big of a gap because the cars aren't, spinning out as they usually are. But even then, I would recommend having a little bit of traction control. For the rain, I like to slap it up to 5 anyway, because then you just have total control and you can kind of just turn your brain off. Generally, I like to have it set on 1 for this car, just so that you avoid shredding the tyres out of corners. Again, you can easily do that just using better throttle control, but again, with these events, I like to kind of just turn my brain off, think about other things, and run the race on autopilot, and I tend to do this kind of thing maybe once a day, because that's like 825 grand a day. Over the course of a month between updates, that's plenty of cash. Because most of the monthly cars don't tend to be that expensive these days. There's not like any 20 million credit cars dropping. So ultimately, if you were looking for something different, something new to add to your roster of cash cows, I would recommend giving this one a try. And I'm sure a couple of the other hybrid and diesel style Le Mans cars, maybe the Audi R18, could be used to similar effect. So maybe for those who perhaps had this one and weren't using the car, you might want to give it a try because it's actually quite a lot of fun. And for me, it's great because I just love the Peugeot 908 anyway. It's one of my favourite race cars. So that's it for this build. Of course, if you are brand new to the channel and this is your first video, you'll definitely want to check out the other cash cows that I've done. Like I said, I did one recently for the Bugatti Vision GT at Spa for about 1.5 mil an hour. This one, doing it twice per hour, will earn you a little bit more. And as I said, it's so quick, you'll just end up sitting around at the end of the race waiting for them to catch up while you wait for the timer to go down. So it's a pretty fantastic car. So give it a try, see if you like it, and of course check out the other ones. But for now, thanks for watching.